talk about a few of the tools that an ethical hacker would utilize in their testing scenarios. To be honest, there are hundreds of tools out there. What you see on the screen are just a few examples of them. Nessus is a vulnerability scanner. What is a vulnerability scanner? It is an automated tool that is designed to identify vulnerabilities within hosts, within operating systems, within networks. So they come with their ready-made databases of all the vulnerabilities that have already been identified, and they scan the network against that database to find out any possible flaws or any possible vulnerabilities that currently exist on the host or the operating system or on the network. Similarly, there would be application scanners like Acunetics or Arachne that would help you scan applications and identify flaws within those applications as well. Now, all of these are automated tools. The essence of ethical hacker is when these tools churn out the reports, the ethical hacker can understand these reports, analyze them, identify the flaws, and then craft their own exploits or use existing exploits in a particular manner so that they can get access or they can bypass the access security controls mechanisms that are already in place. How can they do that? With the tool called Metasploit. You see that big M there on the right hand side? That M logo is for a tool called Metasploit, which is a penetration testing tool. What is a penetration testing tool? It is that tool that will allow an ethical hacker to craft their exploits or choose their exploits for the vulnerabilities that have been identified by Nessus. Since we are interacting with computers, we will always be interacting using tools, right? So the first tool, Nessus, identifies the flaws and the possible list of vulnerabilities. We do a penetration test using Metasploit to validate those flaws and to verify that those flaws actually exist, and try to figure out the complexity of those flaws. And that's where Metasploit helps us do that. Wireshark would be used in the background while we are doing both the activities using Nessus or Metasploit to keep a track of what packets are being sent and received on the network, which will help us analyze those packets. So whenever I run a Nessus scanner, I would run a Wireshark in the background. It will capture the data packets and I can go through those data packets and analyze that data packets to identify what Nessus is actually trying to do. Similarly, when I try to attack a machine using exploit on Metasploit, I will keep on Wireshark running in the background to capture the data packets that have been sent and the responses that I've received from the victim, so that I can also go through those packets and analyze the responses and analyze the attack, whether it was successful, to what extent was it successful, and basically will also give me a validation, a proof of the activity that has happened. Nmap is another automated tool that allows me to scan for open ports and protocols. So why would I use Nmap? Because ports and protocols become an entry point for a hacker to gain access to devices. For example, when we connect to a web server, we connect through a web browser, but we automatically connect to port 80 using HTTP and port 443 is using HTTPS. So if I'm connecting to a web server using HTTPS, it is safe to assume that port 443 on the web server is open to accept those connections. Similarly, there would be other services that may be left open on the web server because nobody thought about configuring it, or they misconfigured the web server and they left unwanted services running. So Nmap will allow me to scan those ports and services and allow me to understand what services are being offered on that server, so then I can start analyzing that server, identify those flaws within those services, and then try to attack them. If the application that I'm analyzing is connected to a database and I want to do a SQL injection attack, or if Nessus tells me that there is a SQL injection attack that may be possible on that particular application, I can use an automated tool called SQL Map or SQL Map that would allow me to automatically craft all the queries that are required for a SQL injection attack and help me do that attack at the same time. So here I do not have to manually create my own queries. The SQL Map tool would automatically create them for me. What I would do is I would use Nessus to identify that particular flaw. If Nessus reports that flaw, I would then go use the tool SQL Map, configure it to attack that particular web server, and when I fire off the tool, it will then automatically start directing queries, SQL injection queries, to the database to see if those databases are vulnerable, and if yes, what data can be retrieved from those databases. So all of these tools in a nutshell would help me hack networks, applications, operating systems, and host devices. And this is what an ethical hacker does. They use these kind of tool sets, they identify what attacks they need to do, they identify the right tool for that particular attack, and they write their exploits, they create those attacks, and then they start attacking, analyze the response, and then give a report to the management, providing them feedback about how the attack was created or crafted, what was the response to that attack, and whether the attack was successful or not. If successful, they would also give recommendations of what to do to prevent these attacks from happening in the future. So when we are doing these attacks, or when we want to launch these attacks, what is the process that we would follow? So there are 6 steps that we would do as an ethical hacker. If you're just a hacker, you probably wouldn't do the 6th step, which is a reporting step. So the first step that would be done is the reconnaissance phase, which is the information gathering phase, which is very important from an ethical hacker's perspective or a hacker's perspective. Because if I want to attack someone or something as a digital device, I need to know what I'm attacking. I need to know the IP address of the device, the MAC address of those devices. I need to know the operating system, the build or the version of that operating systems, applications on top, the versions of those applications, so I know what I'm attacking. For example, if I want to attack a server, I assume it's a Windows-based server and I use a particular tool to attack it, but it actually turns out to be a Linux-based server, my attacks are going to be unsuccessful. So I need to focus my attack based on what is there at the other end. So in my information gathering phase, I want to identify all of that information. Once I have that information done, I'm going to scan those servers using tools like Nmap that we just talked about. And we're going to try to see the open ports, open services, and protocols that are running on that server that can give me possible entry points within the network or within the device or within the operating system. At the same time, along with the scanning with Nmap, I would run a vulnerability scanner, the Nessus vulnerability scanner we talked about, or Acunetics for applications, and then I would try to identify vulnerabilities in those applications, operating systems, or networks. Once I have identified those vulnerabilities in the scanning phase, I would then move on to the gaining phase, where I would then craft my exploits or choose existing exploits and start attacking the victim. At this point in time, if my attack is successful, I will probably have gained access by either cracking passwords or escalating privileges or exploiting a vulnerability that I may have found during the scanning phase. Once I have gained my access, I want to maintain my access. Why? Because the vulnerability may not be there for long. Maybe somebody updated the operating system and hence the flaw was no longer existing, or somebody changed the password that I may have cracked, thus I no longer have access. So what do I do to maintain my access? I install Trojans or backdoor entries to those systems using which I can secretly, in a covert manner, get access to those devices at my own will, at my own time, as long as those devices are available over the network. So that's where I maintain my access. I have hacked them. Now I want to maintain my access, so I install a software which would give me a backdoor entry to that device no matter what. Once I have done this, I want to clear my tracks. So whatever activity that I've been doing, for example, installing a Trojan is also a software that would create directories and files once installed on the victim's machine. So I want to hide that. If I have accessed data stores, if I have modified data, I want to hide that activity, because if the victim comes to know that something has happened, they would start increasing their security parameters. They might start scanning their devices. They may take them offline. Thus, my hack would no longer be efficient. The reason I'm clearing my tracks is that the victim doesn't find out that they have been hacked or they have been compromised, or even if they do find out that they've been compromised, they cannot trace the compromise back to me. So I would be deleting references of any of the IP addresses or MAC addresses that I may have used to attack that particular device. And this is where I will be able to identify where those logs were created, where those traces are. Once I take off those traces, the victim would not be any wiser of whether they have been compromised or who compromised their system. And if I am successful at all of these stages, or to whatever extent the success that I've achieved in any of these stages, I would then create a report based on that, and I would report to the management about the activities that we have been able to do and whatever we have been able to achieve out of those activities. For example, we identified 10 different flaws. There were 20 different attacks that we wanted to do. What attack did we do? What was the outcome of that attack? What was the intended or the expected output of that attack? I'll create a report which would give a detailed analysis of all the steps that were taken, along with screenshots and evidences of what activity was conducted, what was the output, what was the expected output, and I would submit that report to the management, giving them an idea of what vulnerabilities and flaws exist in their environment or their devices that need to be mitigated so that the security can be enhanced. So these are the 6 steps that the ethical hacking process would take. Just going through this, the reconnaissance is where you're going to use hacking tools like Nmap, HPing to obtain information about targets. There are hundreds of tools out there depending on what information you want. Then in scanning, again, Nmap, Nexpose, these kind of tools to be utilized to identify open ports, protocols, and services. In gaining access, you're going to exploit a vulnerability by using the Metasploit tool that we talked about in the previous slides. In the maintaining access, you're going to install backdoors. You can use Metasploit at the same time. You can craft your own scripts to create a Trojan and install it on the victim's machine. Once you have achieved that, clearing tracks is where you're going to clear all evidences of your activity so that you do not get caught or the victim doesn't even realize that they have been hacked. And once you're done all of this, we are going to create reports that are going to be submitted to the management to help them understand the current security evaluation of their organization. So now let's see how we can hack using social engineering. Now, what is social engineering? Social engineering is the art of manipulating humans into revealing confidential information which they otherwise would not have revealed. So this is where your social skill and your people skills come into the picture. If you are able to communicate effectively to another person, they would probably give up more information that they intended to give out. Let's look at examples, right? If you see on the screen, phishing activity. What is phishing? We receive a lot of fake mails on a regular basis. We have always received those emails where we have won a lottery of a few $1 million, but we have never realized that we didn't purchase a lottery to win a lottery in the first place. We have always had those Nigerian frauds where a prince died in some South African country and you out of 7 billion people on the planet have been identified where they want to transfer a few $100 million through your account and they want to give you 50% of that money in return as thank you. So some very basic attacks where you go onto websites and there's a banner flashing at you saying congratulations, you're the 1 millionth visitor to this website, click here to claim your prize. All of these are social engineering attacks, phishing attacks, fake websites, fake communications being sent out to users to prey on their gullibility. Most of humans always have that dream of striking it rich, winning a huge lottery once and for all, and living their life lavishly ever after. But sadly, in the real world, that doesn't happen that often. And if you're receiving those mails, it is very important that you first research the validity of those communications before you even want to act upon them. So why are humans susceptible to social engineering? Because humans have emotion. Machines do not. Try pleading with a machine to give you access to an account that you have forgotten a password to. The machine wouldn't even know what you're doing. Try pleading with a human, sympathy or empathy, where you could try to create a social engineering attack where you can plead with them saying, if I do not get access to this account immediately, I might lose my job. And then that would put my family into problems. Somebody would feel empathy or sympathy towards you and help you reset that password and give you access to that account. It's how good the attack is and how convincing you are for the success of this attack to happen. So what is a familiarity exploit? Attackers interact with victims to gain information which will benefit the attackers to crack credentials. As passwords, if we want to reset our passwords, what do we have as a mechanism to resetting passwords? We have some security questions that we set up. Those questions are nothing but personal information that we would know, but through a social engineering attack, it would be easily be able to gather the information that you have set for your security questions. The security questions can be as simple as the first school that you attended. You probably have that listed on your LinkedIn profile, where a person can just go in there and see your academic qualifications and identify the school that you were in, right? Similarly, it might also be a question, what was your mother's maiden name? That's a very good attack. And that's, if a person can interact with you, let's say they are trying to take a survey and they approach you for a feedback on a particular product that you have been utilizing and they ask you these questions, you wouldn't think twice before giving those answers. As long as the request sounds legitimate to us, we are able to justify that request, we do answer those queries. So it's upon us to verify the authenticity of the request coming in before we answer it. Phishing, as discussed, would be fraudulent emails which appear to be coming from a trusted source. So email spoofing comes into mind, fake websites, and so on and so forth. Exploiting human curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat, right? right? So there's so many physical attacks where hackers just keep pen drives lying around in a parking lot. Now this is a generic attack. Whoever falls victim will fall victim. So if I just throw around a few USBs in the parking lot, obviously with Trojans implemented on them, some people who are curious or who are looking for a couple of freebies might take up those pen drives, plug them in their computers to see what data is on the pen drives. At the same time, once they plug in those pen drives on their computers, the virus or the Trojan would get infected and cause harm to their machine. Then exploiting human greed. We just talked about the Nigerian frauds and the lotteries, those kind of attacks, the fake money making gimmicks. Now basically this is where you prey upon the person's greed kicking in, and they are clicking on those links in order to get that money that has been promised to them in that email. So one of the safest mechanism to keep data private and to keep yourself secure is using encryption. Now encryption can happen through cryptography. What is cryptography? Cryptography is the art of scrambling data using a particular algorithm so that the data becomes unreadable to the normal user. The only person with the key to unscramble that data would be able to unscramble it and make sense out of that data. So we're just making it unreadable or non-readable by using a particular key or a particular algorithm, and then we're going to send the key to the end user. The end user using this same key would then decrypt that data. If anybody compromises that data while it is being sent over the network, since it is encrypted, they would not be able to read it. So the encryption algorithm would be something like this. Now if you see the computer word once made into unreadable format would look like EQORXVGT. For an end user it wouldn't make any sense, but the person who has a key to unscramble that would be able to convert it back to computer and then understand the meaning of that word. So this is just a substitution cipher that is being shown on the screen. So what is the alphabet? The key is alphabet plus 3. So C plus 3 alphabets, that becomes E. O becomes Q. M becomes O. So the key that is utilized to scramble the data is the character that you are at. The third character from there would be the corresponding key. So the encrypted message is also known as a cipher. The decryption is just the other way around, where you know the key now and you can now figure out what that E corresponded to by going back 3 characters in the alphabet. Most of the times a certified ethical hacker must decrypt a message without knowing the secret key. So let's say a ransomware has affected your organization or has affected a device, and you want to figure out or you want to decrypt that data. Now as an ethical hacker, you wouldn't be for paying a ransom to the hacker, would you? So it is now your prerogative of how you're going to work around and how you're going to try to crack the encryption mechanism, how to crack the cipher to decrypt that message and see what's within it, right? Decryption without the use of a secret key, that is known as a cryptanalysis. Cryptanalysis is the reversing of an algorithm to figure out what the decryption was without using a key. So cryptanalysis can be done using various formats. The first one is a brute force attack, second is a dictionary attack, the third one is a rainbow table attack. A brute force attack is trying every combination, permutation and combination of the key to figure out what the key was. It is 100% successful, but may take a lot of time. A dictionary attack is where you have created a list of possible encryption mechanisms, a list of possible cracks, and then you try to figure out whether those cracks work or not. Rainbow tables are where you have an encrypted text in hand and you're trying to figure out the similarities between the text that you have and the encrypted data that you wanted to decrypt in the first place. So in the brute force attack, you're trying every possible combination, permutation of what the key would be. In dictionary attack, you have a word list that would tantamount to the key, and if you're trying to match all the words listed in the text file or the word list to see if any of those words are going to work to decrypt that data. Here in the rainbow table, the ciphertext is compared with another ciphertext. You find out similarities and then you try to work or reverse engineer your way accordingly. So let's have a quick demo on cryptography before we end this session. So to begin with the demo of cryptography, we are on a website called spammimic.com, which will help us scramble the message that we created into a completely format which would be unrelated to the topic at hand. So if I say I want to encode a message, turn a short message into spam. So what this does is, you want to send across a secret message, you type in the secret message, a short one, and it will convert that into a spam mail. You send it across, so whoever's reading that spam mail would never get an idea of the embedded message within it. So if I want to type in a message here, hi, this is a secret message, the password is ASD@1234, and I want to send this out to people or to one of my colleagues, but I want to send it out in a secret manner so that others are not aware of this. So when I press on encode, what the algorithm will do is it will convert this message into a spam mail. So my message, hi, this is a secret message, the password is @1234 or ASD@1234, gets converted into this. Now if you read it, dear e-commerce professional, this letter was specially selected to be sent to you. This doesn't make sense. There is nowhere or no reference to the actual message that I've already said. So if I copy this entire message and I send it, let's say via email, to the recipient. Now the thing is that the recipient needs to know that I've encoded it using Spam Mimic. The algorithm needs to remain the same. So once they know that it is Spam Mimic, what they can do is, now in this instance what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new browser and I'm going to go to the same website. And at this point in time, I'm going to click on decode. When I click on decode, I'm going to paste the message that I've just copied. There we are. And this message is now being copied into a different browser. And if I decode this, you will see that it will convert it back to the original message that there was. So the key is there at Spam Mimic, and it is embedded within the message. So whenever we paste the message in the decode factor, it knows what the key was and it can decrypt that message and give me the actual message that was embedded within it. There we are, the entire message. This is what we created in the Google Chrome browser, and in the Firefox browser we decoded. Similarly, if I want to protect these kind of messages, there is an AspenEncrypt.com website where, let's say, we use text encryption and I want to encrypt the same message. This is a secret message. The password is ASD@1234, and then I give it a password to protect this message, let's say the word password, and I use the cipher to scramble this by using, let's say, AES, which is the strongest cipher right now, and I say encrypt. So this is what the encryption would look like. And basically if I don't have the password over here, if I decrypt it, you would see that the error has occurred. Now if I type in the password over here and then decrypt it, it will be able to convert that back into the unscrambled text, and it will give me what the original message was. This is a secret message. The password is ASD@1234. So if I want to keep my data secure from hackers, I want to scramble it in such a way that they would not be able to crack it, or it would be very difficult for them to crack it. And this is one of the first mechanisms that would be recommended by any ethical hacker to keep the data secure.